Do you want your students to be fluent in foreign language? Well, we want to help. So we are so glad you're here. We're going to be talking about foreign language in high school and foreign language fluency. My name is Lisa from True North Academy, and I'm joined by our department chair for foreign language, Hannah Nearing. So Hannah, so glad you're here to talk to us about foreign language acquisition in high school. We are going to give you 5 tips. Super excited about this. It's Foreign Language Week, by the way. And so we've had videos and Instagram and social media posts all week long. And foreign language is near and dear to our hearts at True North Academy. We offer 7 foreign languages. We want to jump in and just talk about what is the purpose of foreign language in high school, because I think a lot of people have this idea about what it is. But Hannah, what are your ideas about foreign language in high school?
That is a great question. So the purpose of foreign language in high school, usually people just approach it as to fulfill the requirements for high school credit, or to be able to have a even looking transcript so that they can get in college really easy. A few people do approach it with the goal of fluency in mind, which you can do that. But usually it's very difficult to become fluent in high school. It is 100% possible, and I highly encourage you to strive for that. But it's usually students find it very difficult to become actually fluent in high school unless you do the language for 3 or 4 years and are really dedicated to it. And it also depends on how much exposure you're getting to the language outside of class and how much you're using it and how much you understand it. And it also has to do with how well your brain can actually pick up on languages too. There's a lot of studies going out on that, that learning languages is actually a skill that your brain actually has to build, and that your brain has to build those neural pathways so that it can sort and understand and translate language. So, but really in high school, I would say that you have to, as a student, have a very clear idea and mission statement for the languages that you learn. Don't just take high school Spanish just because, that's what everyone does. Have a mission statement for yourself, say something that you're going to be really fired up about, and keep that where you'll see it on a regular basis, because it's a goal, right?
So what would be a mission? What would be an example of a mission statement for a high schooler to create for themselves about foreign language in high school?
That is a great question. It's very varied. I've known some students who they're like, I want to be a missionary, so I want to learn Spanish really well so that I can go do missions. I know some students who say, I want to be a student in Germany. I want to go to theological school or psychological school, or, that's not the right word, but psychology. Psychological school is something very different. But so you have to have something in mind, a goal that you're working towards, that the language itself equips you to achieve. And for me, it was, I wanted to be able to get decent scholarships going into college and not have to worry about admissions or anything like that. And so I not only wanted to fulfill the requirements for high school, but also kind of set myself apart. And I figured if I had a couple of different foreign languages under my belt, the college would be like, oh, that's interesting. We want that person on our team. So it actually really worked out. But I would recommend, if you're going to do that, we'll talk about that later. But
well, you touched on a couple of different things. You touched on requirements for high school and college admissions. You touched on student standout factor. And I do want to talk about that for just a minute. We have talked about that at True North all the time, helping your students create a student standout factor, not just for college admissions, but for scholarship dollars. And studying one language to fluency or conversationalism at least, or studying multiple foreign languages, is a great way to build the student standout factor. So I love that. And I'm going to segue right into requirements, because that was our second point to talk about with parents and students, is requirements for high school foreign language. I'm going to talk for just a minute, because this is transcripts and college admissions and military admissions and all those kind of things is kind of what I do. And so I want to talk about this really plain talk here, because a lot of parents are so worried their kids will not get into college or university if they don't have 2 years of foreign language. The reality is, even if a college has that as a requirement, if your student is somebody that they want, they will waive that requirement. Now, you're going to make your student be more just more competitive if they do have foreign language. And you're going to make them more competitive, not just for admissions to colleges that are more difficult to get into, but you're going to make them more competitive for college scholarships if they have not just one language for 2 years, but multiple languages for 2 or more years. And at True North, we have students every year who take more than one language at a time. Really popular combination is Latin 1 and 2 for sure. And I think that is a great foreign language to start with in middle school. That's what you did, isn't it, Hannah? You started with Latin in middle school. Mm-hmm. It sets you up for how to learn a foreign language. Latin isn't dead like you hear all the time, but that's like maybe a whole different discussion we can put off till another day. But your kids are going to learn vocabulary and grammar, which is going to be easy vocab for them, because in English, we use 15,000 anglicized Latin vocabulary words. So they already know some Latin. They're going to learn grammar, which is so important when you're studying a foreign language, and they're going to learn some culture. Latin has a lot of moving parts. A lot of ancient languages, let me put it that way, have more moving parts than more modern languages. So they learn how to manage and balance all those pieces. But what are the requirements? Generally, I would say 2 years of foreign language for high school. And then a lot of colleges no longer have foreign language requirements for graduation. It just depends on the major. But there are a lot of fields that are perfect for knowing and studying foreign language. Would you agree with that? I mean, how would a parent and a student set themselves up for ease and transition into studying or working in vocations that would really benefit from foreign language acquisition?
Well, I think every field really has a specific place for languages. So even in STEM, they really appreciate having someone who is bilingual on staff for translation and stuff like that. So there's always a place. But I would say if you really want to set yourself apart, the harder the language, the better it is. And I wouldn't say start with a hard language. Unless you have someone, unless you have like a nanny who speaks a very difficult language. Like I know people who grew up speaking very difficult language, that sort of thing. Yes. But, or you're in an area that has a lot of exposure to a very difficult language. Like you're in an area with a lot of Arabic, you're in an area with a lot of Russian or German or, whatever. But not a lot of people have that. So I would start with, again, something a little simpler like Latin, which Latin was really interesting because people are like, oh my gosh, Latin's so hard. Yes and no. Like I've done Chinese. There are bigger fish to fry. But Latin is very difficult in that it's a different mindset. It's an ancient mindset. And so for that, especially as Westerners, modern Westerners, it is very difficult. Postmodern Westerners, it's very difficult for us to shift mindset and to think in that way. And then once you get that, it's much easier. But mostly, the other thing that's very difficult about Latin too is it's taught mostly from a grammar perspective for translation. And that's a whole different art form. It's not really, translation is not the same as foreign language use because translation is not conversational. It's a different skill set. So you're learning that skill set, which later on is very beneficial. And getting you into that thought pattern and stuff like that. But it's not the same. But if you learn a very difficult language, that is a great standout factor.
Yes, like exactly.
You learn an Asian language or Russian or German or a Middle Eastern language. Big standout factor. I would say just word wise, don't use Duolingo to learn that hard language.
Well, Duolingo
is some weird stuff.
But some of those apps they're great for overview. And I think a lot of people want to count back to requirements. A lot of people want to count Duolingo as a high school credit, but it is so simplistic. It really doesn't have the rigor or the depth. It doesn't have the width or the depth of a high school program. So I would say it's great for overview and like an introduction, but it's limited in scope.
I would agree with that mostly, except for this. I would say in one way, I would stay away from Duolingo as much as possible because of this one reason. It doesn't take the culture into account at all. And also some of the grammar is incorrect. So it teaches you to think in English in a different language. I have weird hobbies. So I did some research into the background of Duolingo. I just have weird pastimes. But so Duolingo was not actually created by linguists. It was created by 2 IT programmers who didn't have much of a background in language. The one had learned English. No, both of them had learned English. One was from somewhere in Central America, and then the other one was from Northern Europe. And so both of them had learned English, but it's not like they were polyglots. It's not like they were multilinguals even. And it's not like they had studied language acquisition. They had studied brain chemistry, and that's why it's gamified. But it's not actually built to really take advantage of the way that your brain thinks and ties things together and stuff like that. So it's not a spaced repetition system.
Right.
It's some of the grammar is correct some of the time, but also there is never a reason why you should say, I am an apple. Like, there's no reason. Even if you're learning grammar, learn something, learn
useful.
Like or something like that. Like, you don't need to learn I am a cat in order to learn, the I am form.
Yeah. So it's good, but limited is what you're saying.
Yeah. And I would also say it doesn't, this is petty, but also it doesn't adapt the graphics to fit the culture. So it's kind of petty, but also like, you're not going to see a purple-haired person while you're learning Arabic. I'm sorry. You're just not. Like,
but that does get to hard and soft skills, which we're going to talk about too. So just keep that in mind, and we'll circle back to that. But as far as requirements and some jobs that really are going to benefit, I mean, and I agree with you, no matter what job you go into, what career field, having a second language is going to be so very helpful. But I'm thinking, you mentioned STEM, but I'm thinking particularly healthcare, business, the ministry, anything with government. If you have a second language under your belt, you're going to go to the top of the line for any of those kind of jobs if you have other skill sets. So we're going to talk about hard and soft skills, but yes.
Well, tying into hard and soft skills, it's not necessarily that they're putting you for the front of the line because you're necessarily going to use that language in that field even.
Right.
It's just because they know that you know how to work.
Yes.
And they know that you are going to be able to think in a difficult way. And also that you're not intimidated. Like, it's just more like, what kind of personality are you?
Yeah.
Kind of like some companies, they look for people who have specifically done sports because they think that it's taught you teamwork.
Yes.
Which sometimes it has. But same thing with foreign language. Like, that's what they're looking for. That's why it puts you in line.
And foreign language, this touches on a great point. It really does build resiliency. You hear this in the homeschool community all the time. Set the curriculum up to work on character. And I'm like, you can build a lot of character studying Latin. You don't have to set it aside. It can be both and, not either or. So requirements. Generally, I would say 1 to 2 years for high school. You will not accepted unless it's a very competitive program like a military academy or an Ivy League or a second tier Ivy. But generally, your local state and colleges and universities and your private schools will take your student with not foreign language under their belt. However, if they do have it, they're going to go into the pile of to be looked at for scholarship dollars. And if they have more than one, especially if they have more than 2 years of foreign language, either all in the same one or in 2 different ones, they're going to go to the top of that pile for scholarship dollars. Because again, it's going to show that this student is going to start and finish. They have resiliency. They know how to study, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to tell them about that student in ways that, other things don't necessarily speak to. So and a lot of colleges don't require any kind of foreign language to graduate. So if that is important to you, you need to check the college requirements. I know, Hannah, you're getting both a major in a language and a major in business. And that is because you're working with a college that takes the language you're really interested in. So you can get a double major or a minor in a language. And again, that is going to really shoot you forward as far as job prospects and opportunities, both in the private sector and government sector.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I would say too, a lot of colleges, even though they don't necessarily require a foreign language anymore, they'll almost always require what they call a cultural project. So it usually requires you to go abroad for a certain amount of time. I knew a couple of a couple of colleges, they just had stuff in the United States just with a culture that wasn't, you're run-of-the-mill American.
Right.
So even then, you're still going to have some of those soft skills that you get with foreign language.
Yeah.
And we'll get into
and it's so helpful. And listen, Spanish is a more widely spoken language around the world than English. So if you just think about it as a global perspective, understanding a second language is going to just allow you to address more of the world. And that's a
Mhm.
benefit on so many levels. We want to talk about strategies for learning a foreign language, because I think a lot of you already mentioned the intimidation factor. And I think a lot of people start a foreign language in high school and go, I don't have the foreign language gene. I'm not really that smart in this area. There's this big joke, like I can barely speak English. You know what I mean? So speak to that a little bit. You already did touch on it. But I think a lot of times kids don't understand the learning curve and the growth process of language acquisition. So what words of encouragement or tips do you have for parents and students about that particular issue?
That is a great question. It kind of reminds me of like my first days in my language learning journey, so to speak. When I was learning Latin, literally, I went from weeks being like, Latin is my favorite subject. It is the best thing ever. And then the next week, I'm like, if I see one more Latin book, if I have to conjugate one more thing, if I have to translate one more sentence about the gulls, the poor little gulls, body parts floating in the river, I'm going to lose my mind.
Yes.
And so it was literally like, you could chart it. Like I would have linguistic mood swings, so to speak. So that's
and you think that's common, probably, maybe?
Yeah. I swore off Latin for a while. I was not happy with it. But that's just part of it, is just going through that frustration, because part of the soft skills of Latin is language is you just have to be patient with yourself. You have to be patient with language. And that's something that, I guess I'm kind of getting ahead, but you just have to be okay with not knowing what's going on. That's something that you kind of just learn. But I would also say too, there's a saying in business, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And that's biblical too. Like to whom there is much, much will be given, and to whom there is little, even what he has will be taken away. And that's kind of the studies that are coming out, that that's actually how language works too. Mm-hmm. The more you do language, the better you get at it. Yeah. And not the other way around. Same thing with sports. Same thing with anything. If you want to get better at it, you have to do more. It's not genetic. It's work. Yeah.
It's putting in the reps. It's like in bodybuilding, you have to go and you have to put in the reps. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people misunderstand what a learning curve is. A learning curve is exactly what you explained at the beginning, where you go forward and then you're, 3 steps forward, a step back, you stumble forward and then you fall back, you run forward and then you run back, and it's back and forth because your brain is creating new neural pathways. And so language acquisition is a whole part of your brain, but foreign language study is both a combination of analyzing and analytical skills, as well as creativity and verbal language skills. So it crosses both hemispheres of your brain, which could be why it's easy for some of us, and it's easy when we're immersed because we have more context, but it also makes it difficult when we're looking at a book or studying a foreign language in the middle of, like, say, Iowa, and you're studying a Middle Eastern language. There's no context there. So giving yourself grace, I think that's a great strategy, actually, when you're learning anything new. And we forget as parents to even encourage our kids with that. Like, it is going to be hard when you're first learning it. Not only that, with a foreign language, you're learning the meta language of language, which is grammar. And that's a whole language unto itself. And different languages have different grammar structures. Most of them follow the same basic patterns, but you had mentioned Chinese before. And so now you're introducing tonalities and hearing, which is another neural pathway. So every foreign language has its own, like, grammar underneath the grammar of, you know what I mean? There's just so much going on. So giving yourself grace and realizing that that learning curve can be pretty steep.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I would say too, going along with strategies, you mentioned like hearing and different pathways and stuff like that. There's a lot of different methodologies, and that's something that's really interesting. If you ever go and research foreign language programs, which I, again, have extensively. Yeah. Also, I have weird hobbies. They each have their own methodology that they'll usually have a statement about on their homepage. And they all use some of the basic principles, but they also have they each focus on one particular input that they really kind of emphasize. Most of them tend to really emphasize listening, because that's just much more easier to do when you don't have a tutor. Yeah. Or like an actual teacher who is familiar with the language. But language itself consists of reading, writing, speaking, and listening. You have to do all 4 in order to achieve fluency, because each of those interface with different parts of the brain. And as you're learning a language, you're actually building a specific pattern in your brain. Each language is a specific, that's why they call them different, your own different brains. You're kind of, well, they say you have a different personality in different languages because it's a different pattern that you're following. And so you have to do all those different inputs to build out that pattern. But a lot of languages, so there's language programs. So there's the story method, there's Pimsleur method, which is uses a lot of translation. So it's listen and repeat. And then there's, what are the other ones? Chunking method, which is you use groups. I think Woda uses that one. You use different chunks. So instead of learning like I am, you are, he, she, it is, you say, I am going to the store. He is going to the store. You learn it that way instead of like conjugation groups and stuff like that. And then again, a lot of ancient languages go for more of the grammatical approach because again, they're trying to go towards more translation. And so then you're just doing brute memorization where you're just memorizing, conjugation tables and stuff like that. And then you also have immersion programs, which is a lot more pricey. And those you can get for like missionary schools.
The government, obviously.
The government, Middlebury, and then the military, different things like that. But interestingly enough, with the military, in order to get into their language programs, they actually do a language acquisition test to see if your brain has the capability to learn languages and how quickly you can do it. So the test actually is written in a made up language. And you have to guess it out, and it's very, very good.
So hold up. You're talking about language acquisition as pattern recognition. I mean, okay, so if your kids are great at pattern recognition, you need to throw them into a foreign language like yesterday. And if they're not good at pattern recognition, you also need to throw them into a language acquisition class like yesterday, because learning a foreign language will help your kids with pattern recognition. And pattern recognition is so very important in this fourth industrial revolution because of analogs and online learning and STEM and all those kind of things. So just learning a foreign language is going to help your kids develop the critical thinking and creativity and communication skills that they really need to succeed in this very highly technical world, even though it doesn't seem very high tech because it's language and communication. But I love that you talked about that. So pattern recognition, this is a great way to teach kids pattern recognition.
Well, even to understand AI, you have to understand pattern recognition because it's just an advanced algorithm. So if you want your kids to really be smart and to be safe on technology, you need to teach them pattern recognition. Right.
And we all want that because tech is changing at such a high speed. Oh my gosh, we just
and with that culture.
And with that culture. So we talked about the purpose of language in high school, requirements for high school and college, different strategies, including pattern recognition.
Can I mention one more thing on strategies real quick? I'm so sorry. So I would just wrap up with the strategies conversation with really know your student and what they're kind of like. I wouldn't use dyslexia as an excuse to run away from foreign language. Like you are perfectly capable. And based off of your strengths and weaknesses, I would really focus on that and use the method that you pick to really play to their strengths and also build up their weaknesses. So if you have a really auditory kid, listen to stories.
And you want them to have quick wins. If they have a learning challenge, well, and I would say you want this with kids anyway, because whenever we're on a learning curve, which can be really steep, we need those quick wins to keep our motivation up. But if you have learning challenge kids, and I want to just really briefly talk about ASL for kids who might have severe learning challenges, because it is a great foreign language. In some ways, it's not technically a foreign language. It's a different form of communication, but it is a great secondary form of communication for kids with learning challenges to learn, because again, it's using different neural pathways. And the research is in on ASL. Kids who use ASL, no matter what the age, their vocabulary increases, their ability to communicate well increases. And again, it's just a different neural pathway. It's kinesthetic instead of auditory or verbal. So great foreign language for kids with learning challenges. But I love what you said. If your kids have dyslexia or other learning challenges, absolutely don't shy away from foreign language learning. It is so helpful and beneficial. You did touch on immersion, and I want to just really tie that in quickly to True North Academy classes. All of our classes are taught by teachers who are fluent in that language. And I think 100% of our foreign language teachers know at least 2 languages, but most of them know 3 or 4, are working on a fifth. They're all polyglots. So they don't just really understand English and their language that they're teaching at True North, but they understand like philology, which is the study of language. They understand like what Hannah was talking about. What does it mean to use various methods, whether you're hearing or storytelling or pattern recognition kind of, and you also mentioned like chunking and, just all those kind of things. So our teachers really get that. And they're creating experiences where the kids are listening and talking in the foreign language in class, as well as doing vocabulary, grammar, and a culture study project every single semester. So I didn't want to shortchange that because I think it's super important. If you're looking for a foreign language teacher who loves the language, which I think a lot of foreign language teachers, they have a language that is like they love. They absolutely love it. And so it's so great to be in a classroom with those kind of teachers because their passion for the language really comes through. And it makes such a world of difference when you're studying it. You absolutely don't get that with an app.
Yes. And you also just get a different approach to language too. Like a
Yeah.
lot of our teachers as well have raised their kids to be bilingual.
Yes.
And just that alone really because they're applying it in their home and they're bringing that expertise. Like Rachel Margion, her kids are trilingual. And
Yeah.
they're young, like,
They are, yeah.
So
And
they bring
here's
that.
what's funny. She has taught all 3 of her kids how to read in a completely different language.
Mhm.
That's the funny part of like funny,
It's
but also
amazing.
like, wow, really? Yeah,
And
exactly.
they love their language. It's a mission for them, not
Yes.
just a pastime, not
Right.
just a hobby, not just a job, but they really want you to succeed in that language and understand it and
Yeah.
love it the way that they do.
And
That
share
is a
the
gift.
culture. Yeah.
Yes.
That truly is a gift. Having a teacher who is passionate about their subject matter and the students,
Mhm.
that is a winning combo. And that's one of the things I love about our team at True North is that those are our teachers. That's our cohort. So come join us. It's going to be a great year. Okay. So we've talked about purpose, requirements, and strategies. We have about 15 more minutes, and I want to talk about how does foreign language acquisition help build soft skills and hard skills? So let's start with one or the other because, but let's define it. What's a hard skill? A hard skill is an easily defined skill. Like I can program a computer in Python. I can speak German to a native German speaker and they can understand it. I can repair a bike tire. It's easily definable. It's a skill that you can apply yourself to and have something complete at the end. A soft skill is something that is a little bit more difficult to define. Like I'm a great communicator. Well, Hitler was also a great communicator. So it's more difficult to define but what it is, but also what the outcomes are. But they're both really super necessary skills. So tell us about hard skills with foreign language acquisition. And we've touched on some of that, like with grammar and stuff. But what do you see as the main hard skills students who are studying a foreign language really come away with?
That is a great question. I would say there's at least 3 hard skills that I can think of off the top of my head that you learn with foreign language. For one, it's the language itself. If you're really diving into it, you have the language itself. And so there's that. And if if you have that skill, then you're able to talk with people in that language, that sort of thing. And then I would say that there's also 2 other skills that you have that you gain with foreign language. One is that, and you get this more with like ancient languages. So biblical Hebrew and Latin, you learn the skill of translation. Yes. And translation specifically on paper. So people don't realize how much of a skill that is, but it is an art to itself.
It's a puzzle. It's a puzzle.
It is. And it's really
a very little bit of it in Greek and Latin. It is, and I like puzzles, but it is a really fun puzzle. And the other thing you realize when you're doing those translation skills is that it's so easy to translate 3 or 4 or 10 different ways, or you might have 2 people in the same room that translate in completely different ways and they're both correct because you're taking into account culture and environment. Anyway, I don't mean to interrupt, but yes, it can be such a fun game for kids, honestly.
Yes. Yeah. 100%. Yes. There's so much just within translation that you really need to learn. Like translating poetry is completely different than translating prose. It's it's a different skill. It's a different mindset. You're doing something completely different. not completely different, but
Yeah.
it is, you have to take, like when you're translating poetry, it is in different grammar format.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You have to, if you're a really good translator, you bring in the meter into
Yep.
the translation. Dorothy Sayers did that very, very well with Dante's Inferno.
Yeah.
But there's just so much going on, and you have to juggle all those parts. Whereas with prose, it's more straightforward, but also you still have all those little things. The other thing that you really learn too with language, and you get this more with modern languages, is just like verbal translation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what people think that you do when you learn a foreign language, is when you go and visit a different, country with your friends, and you're like, oh, like this happened to me in Israel. When we went to Israel, my friends were like, oh my gosh, you speak Hebrew? Tell us what that sign means, that sort of thing. And they're like, talk to this guy, figure out what's going on. I'm like, that is way above my pay grade. Like, like I can get some things, but like they're talking in like a much higher level than I'm able to communicate. And so then they just wanted me to translate everything. And that's a skill to itself, because, you're translating tonality, you're translating their inflection, you're translating body language, you're also translating culture at the same time. It's similar to what you learned with ancient languages, but it is not the same skill. And
well, and you're translating on your feet.
Yes.
And you're translating slang as well. Plus you're translating the grammar. And that's one thing, when you have a piece of paper, you can go, oh, here's the direct object, here's the verb, here's the noun. You can pick them out, but when you're hearing it, you don't have your little grammar chart in front of you. It's a whole different, it's a really different.
And it's different personalities too.
Yes.
Like, it's usually people who translate verbally, they're a little bit more fun. People who translate, just on paper, they're like very analytical. They get excited about the dots and dashes. They're like, look at this. This is so beautiful. It's like, you are weird. And, like they're just different kinds of people. Yeah. They're like, look at this breath mark. Like this changes the whole meaning. I'm like, it's an accent, buddy. Just the final syllable. Like, let's not get too excited.
Yes.
So it's different personalities. That's really, but it's also different skills.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say those two are the big hard skills that you really learn.
Yeah.
With foreign language.
Yeah. And let's talk about soft skills. And again, we talk about the 4 C's of education all the time at True North: creativity, communication, critical thinking skills, and collaboration. And as our kids are living and working in this 4th industrial revolution and a global gig economy, these 4 soft skills are going to become more important than ever before. Because I mean, I am online with people from around the world, like every single week. And I know, Hannah, you are too. And so that's the world our kids are going to live in. They're going to be online with people from different countries, with different languages, different religions, different worldviews. And learning a second language can not only help them communicate in that language possibly, but help them understand, like, culturally, how to communicate in a more global way. And I don't mean as a globalist. I mean more in having compassion for people who don't come from the same place that we do. So, I mean, I'm sure you have more to add about soft skills, but like as a general intro with all of the things that I'm always talking about.
Yeah, no, that's a great intro. That's a really great overview. I think something that has shocked me the most with having studied multiple languages, not just one, and I wouldn't recommend anyone to just stop with like a first or second language, even if you just kind of brush up a little bit, not necessarily brush up, but just kind of do an overview of different languages. I would highly recommend it, not necessarily with the goal of fluency, just to understand a different mindset. So just understanding pronunciation and like 10 really common phrases. I would highly recommend it. Something that has shocked me the most with learning foreign languages is how people are so similar. Like humanity is the same across the globe, and yet they're so different at the same time. Like they have, like, that's something that really shocks me. Like, they have a different idea of what literature is or what music is, or, and it surprises me every time, and it shouldn't, but it does. Like it's so shocking how big of a world it is, and yet also like humans are still humans. We're still sinful. Yes. We're still sinful, but we're also still kind at the same time.
Well, and everybody still wants to be connected with family and
Mhm.
their home and have some adventure and have something important to do. Those are common traits for all humanity. We all want to be part of a vision and a mission that's meaningful, and we want to be connected with those people who are meaningful to us. So, yeah, I love that. I
Yeah.
love that. That's so important. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say, like, to sum up that, but the soft skill that it really teaches you, I don't want to say it's like opening your mind, because that sounds really like, ooh,
Yeah.
like you're on something, you've been, eating grass or something. But it really does make I don't know, like there's no way to really describe it. It just gives you a different perspective.
Right.
And I guess it makes you realize, like, wherever you're at, it's not the be all and end all. There's somewhere else,
Right.
like
Right.
there's other people
Right.
besides your country. There's other countries besides your country. There's other people besides, like, the people around you. There's a different way of looking at things and seeing things.
Yeah.
And it's really amazing doing that as a Christian. A lot of linguists are very secular.
Mhm.
And a lot of polyglots become very secular and usually not necessarily Christian.
Mhm.
And so that was something going into multilingualism that I was very aware of. But something that God has been working with me on as I've been studying foreign languages is how much God loves people all around the world. His image is on humanity.
Right.
And that God is at work in the different countries. Even though it doesn't necessarily, like, that's something that's shocking about politics. Like, a lot of countries are working against each other, but using each other as they're working against each other.
Right.
Like, if you approach it as a Christian, as you're learning these languages and learning about these different political structures and histories and social structures and all these different things, you still see, like, God is on the move in these different places.
Yes.
And this is a plan for these different countries.
Right.
And God is, if something bad happens in your country, well, maybe he's using it for good in a different country,
Right.
And that's something that's very exciting to me about learning foreign language, is that he gives you a heart of compassion by understanding a little bit about them and a little bit about where their brain space is at, their mindset, that sort of thing. So I would say that's a big soft skill, or like a spiritual skill, I guess.
Absolutely. I love it so much. Yes. And I would say that too is the heart of our teachers at True North Academy, is that they really consider teaching the foreign language that they're teaching part of their mission, their true mission in the world, to bring humanity to a greater understanding of each other, because we're all created in the image of a living God. And so there's that real honoring of people around the world. And so, again, we're not teaching globalism, we're teaching compassion for all the people of the world in our foreign language classes. And I love that so much. I mean, it's such a great group of people.
Two of our teachers actually were missionaries, and they still say, like, I am a missionary.
Yes.
Teaching foreign language to me is equipping the next generation to share the gospel. That is what this language is about. That is what this class is about. And it's such an honor to work with the teachers at True North, all of them. They're so amazing. But another soft skill I would say that you learn with foreign language is, courage to mess up and fail fast and not always be right. Like, that takes a lot of guts to be okay with not being right, because your grammar's not always going to be right. You're going to say y'all. You're going to say ain't. And actually, if you're speaking correctly and fluently, you should say ain't, because the extra syllable is way too much work and carbon dioxide, and so those are skills that you learn. But also grit, I think, is one, with finishing what you started and doing something difficult and being okay with doing something difficult. And again, being okay with being wrong and doing the grammar even though you don't want to, and saying that the gulls' parts were floating in the river even though you don't want to, and that their skulls were buried in the mount. I'm still not, I wonder if I have trauma from Latin. Vivid imagery. Like, and we translated that sentence multiple times.
Over and over, yes.
Go to Caesar, but still, like, I feel like that was a little excessive. But those, I think, are some soft skills. I would also say you learn a lot of study skills as well. But yeah, those are the ones.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I would also say you learn conversational skills. That's something that kind of shocked me.
Yeah.
Was For one, realizing how little my generation understands conversations was very shocking. Learning foreign languages, because when you learn a foreign language, usually some of the entry things that you learn is like, how is your family?
Right.
The weather. How are you feeling? Like, you know, what's your favorite color? You know, you just learn conversation skills as you're learning a foreign language. And it's really nice if you're a very analytical person, because it's like, oh, here's how to have a conversation written out here, ABC. And I would also say too, a lot of cultures, not all, like, you know, not Europe so much, but South America, Africa, any ancient language. So any languages in those areas tend to be a lot more family focused.
Right.
And so that is also a paradigm shift coming from our postmodern kind of mindset, that it's not always about individualism, that it's also about the family unit, that is about family honor. And I would say, as you study a foreign language, especially with, you know, more ancient kind of roots, you do kind of develop your character, because you're thinking about, what's my honor? What's my family values?
Right.
You know, these are the values of this culture. What are mine?
Right.
And that's something that's really interesting watching people when they learn a second language or when they go abroad, is they're like, they kind of have panic, because they're like, we don't really have a culture with America. You know, we don't really have values per se. But I mean, of course, you need to figure that out for yourself and your own identity. But that's something that's very interesting. So
yes,
those would be some of the soft skills that I would say.
And there's more. We have a lot of resources for language learning and talking about how Spanish is important, German is important. We have a free German recipe book, on and on the blog and the website at North Homeschool Academy, on our Instagram account, and on our podcast. We also have some freebies. Of course, the German recipe book is free. We have self-paced ASL and self-paced Spanish, but we do teach live online: Hebrew, Spanish, Latin, German, French, ASL, Russian, and did I say Hebrew already? I think so. So 2 of those languages are critical, Russian and Hebrew, which means more scholarship dollars, more acceptance into the place that your kiddo wants to go. I would love to keep talking, but I have another appointment. But if you guys have any questions about foreign language, you can reach out to us. Hannah is happy to answer any questions you have about any of the foreign languages or our approach to foreign language at True North Academy. She knows what the teachers are teaching and why they're teaching it. It's a well thought out approach for every language, and it tends to be a little bit different for the various languages. If you have any questions about True North Academy at all, we'd love to answer those. And of course, you can buy a 3, 6, 10-pack bundle and share them among siblings for a savings. And we also have a standing ministry and military discount. So let us know if you need any information about that. Again, it's Foreign Language Week. And so we've been celebrating all week long with great posts and information on the Facebook page, Instagram, on our email newsletter. So if you're not on that, make sure you get on there. And we will look forward to hearing from you. Hannah, as always, it's delightful to talk about foreign language with you. I always learn something. And I love all your bunny trails and all the research that you do on foreign language. It's exciting because there's so much great stuff out there. It's never been easier to learn a foreign language, I would say, with all of the tools available. But finding the right tool for your student might be challenging. So if you need help with that, we do have free academic advising. But again, you can always reach out to us, and I can put you in touch with Hannah. And might help you with some good tips. Any last comment you want to say about foreign language, Hannah, as we're wrapping this up?
Carpe diem.
That's a great place to stop, you guys. Thanks for joining us today at True North Academy, and we will talk to you soon.
See ya.